So today, my name is Erin from, well, every day, but I'm Erin from Vintage Fitness. And we do webinars here at Vintage Fitness every 6 weeks. They're free webinars and they're on all different topics. We talk a lot about exercise, which is really our specialty, nutrition. But I think it's really important, especially because we specialize working with seniors, that we talk about brain health. We do a lot of brain health work as an organization with our clients. We're all certified with dementia and exercise special certifications. So I thought it would be helpful to almost do a book club today and go through this book that Dr. Gupta wrote, Keep Sharp, Build a Better Brain at Any Age. So it's nice to see all of you here. Again, if you haven't attended a webinar in the past, there is a question and answer feature, and there's also the chat. So I welcome Gurmit, who is helping me handle the tech at the back end, and he may interrupt and ask questions as they come up, just in case I don't see them during the presentation. So again, welcome. It's really great to see all of you. So about Vintage Fitness, so a lot of you are current clients. We have Sid here, who is a client growth manager at Vintage Fitness. But if you haven't been exposed to us before, we're very specialized in working with seniors. So we only work with seniors, and clients do achieve their health goals with us. And we have a lot of clients on this call who I can see every day making amazing strides with their goals. It's slow and steady. So the ethos is really about making small positive changes to your lifestyle that make an enormous difference over time. So this is not the 90-day transformation, the building the bikini body. It's a different kind of ethos of the company. And we've been doing it for a while. So I started the company in 2005, and we now have a team of 14 trainers. We work across the greater Toronto area, from Hamilton all the way through to Scarborough, as far north as Aurora, and kind of everywhere in between. So we do in-person personal training with seniors, and we also do virtual training. And talk about cognitive health, we have trainers that can speak 9 different languages across the team. So in today's session, we're going to start challenge the brain rate from the get-go, and you're going to take a quiz that is in, so most of the material is in this book that was on the cover. It's called Keep Sharp, Build a Better Brain at Any Age by Sanjay Gupta. He is a neuroscientist, and he's also, he does work with CNN. So you may have seen some of his work before. You're going to better understand how your memory works, learn how to feed and nourish your brain, and discuss a brain health strategy. So you come away with some strategies to help you build a better brain. So it's going to be fairly casual. If you have questions, drop them either into chat or question and answer. I'll probably talk for about 20 or 30 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions. Okay. So again, I know a lot of you. My name is Erin. I'm the owner of Vintage Fitness. I am a personal trainer. My academic background, I have an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in biology from the University of Guelph. And then I have an MBA from the McMaster University. So starting right away, Gurmit, if you could launch that poll. In the book, Dr. Gupta has 24 questions to assess some potential risks to your brain. I've shifted it to 20 questions. So if you could launch that poll for me, Gurmit, we can have people answer those. So Gurmit, I'm not seeing the questions coming up. Are they showing up for you?
Yes, I can see the questions.
Great. Good.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll give people 2 or 3 minutes to just answer those questions. And then when those are done, if you could share the poll, that would be great.
We can see 11% has participated yet.
Great. How are we doing there, Gurmit? People are still working away.
So we can say around 50% have voted.
Okay.
There's one question in the chat. If answer is no to all, it will allow me to submit.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Lisa. I'll keep the no's in mind. Okay, so if you could share the results,
Yeah.
that would be great. And if you need more time, just drop it in the chat and we can easily give you more time to answer those questions.
So the results are shared.
Yes, if you could share the screen, that would be great.
Just a minute.
Or share the
I think
results.
Attendees can see it. I will send you the screenshot. Because I think. Erin, are you able to see the results?
I can't see it on mine, but you can talk me through it and we can.
Okay, so in question 1, the first option, do you suffer from any brain-related 10%? Next is 20%. The next 30%. Are you overweight 50%?
Okay.
Are you woman 80%? Have you been diagnosed with cardiovascular 20%?
Okay.
Metabolic disorders 70%.
Is there any ones that are really high, Gurmit?
Are you a woman is highest metabolic disorder 70%.
Okay.
And the top highest is, are you over 65 years old? 90%.
Right. Okay, that's great. So those results, so in Dr. Gupta's book, if you have 5 or more yeses to those questions, there is some concerns. In this presentation, I mean, we can't control whether we're a woman and we can't control whether we're 65. So I'm really going to focus on what we can do from a lifestyle perspective to make a difference. But the questions are interesting for you to keep in mind, the 20 questions you just answered, because based on hundreds and hundreds of research studies and a neuroscientist's perspective, these are the risk factors that could be issues for your brain health. And we'll kind of get into some of them. I just wanted to get the ball rolling. A bit more about the brain. So your brain weighs about 3 pounds. They haven't counted them all, but they think there's around 100 billion brain cells. Some of those are still a mystery in terms of the counting piece. And it's 73% water. The interesting thing here is that just being a little bit dehydrated can cause some brain fog or can cause a headache. So if you do have a bit of a brain fog or you're feeling like a bit of a headache, I always say to my teenagers, first thing is sit down and have a big glass of water and just see if that makes a difference, because the brain does have so much percentage of water in it. I really liked this one. So brain information can travel faster than some race cars. So it's just incredible how quickly our brains can work. We think that supercomputers, but really you have a supercomputer in your head. The brain starts slowing down at 24, which I was surprised. I thought, holy moly, for me, that was a long time ago. For a lot of us, that was a long time ago. But the interesting thing is the brain actually peaks at different ages for different skills. So vocabulary, an example, actually peaks in your early 70s, just because the amount of volume of words that you would have read in that time. Neuroplasticity is something you've probably heard of, and it's essentially how elastic your brain is. So if you have damage to one part of your brain, can your brain use another pathway to get the message that it needs to send through. And that's how neuroplastic your brain is. And it's a lot more neuroplastic than we thought in the past, where if there's blunt trauma, we thought, oh no, that part of the brain is diseased. Well, there might be issues, but are there other pathways that the brain can take? So memory. This was new information when I read the book to me, and I found it quite interesting. So the example I'm going to use is driving a car. So it isn't that, you know, if I'm driving my car, I have one part of my brain that has a little section all about this is me driving the car. It actually pulls, in this example, driving a car, from 4 different sets of brain cells within your brain. So there will be a memory of how to actually operate the car. There will be a memory of how to navigate the streets. There will be one set of brain cells that will take you through, well, what are the driving rules? How do I follow the street signs? And then interestingly, there's another set of brain cells that will be responsible for telling you about the thoughts and feelings. Maybe you've had a car accident and some of those emotions come up. So if you want to kind of read through that, that's on page 42 of Keep Sharp. But it made me quite interested, because if you think about it, you know, sometimes you can have a memory and you kind of have bits of the memory, but not all of it. It's a bit confusing, but the reason is because your memory is pulling from different parts of the brain as opposed to all one part. There's 3 different stages or steps when we're forming a memory. So the first one is encoding. So this is using your senses to have the experience. And new dendrites in the brain will form when we use our senses to have this new experience. Paying attention to the experience when you're encoding it is the most important thing if you want to remember the experience. So the example I'll use this morning, because we're in fall and it's a gorgeous fall day, would be going for a walk with the fall, in the fall, you know, in the autumn. So you're smelling that sort of decomposed leaf smell. You might be hearing some shuffling under your feet or crunching as you step on the decaying leaves. Maybe the tops of your ears, you can feel they're a little tingly because it's a little bit cool in the air. And you might be tasting a warm tea or coffee that you have in your hand. So using your full senses will help you encode a memory, and we'll keep coming back to pay attention when, if there's something, I mean, if you don't want to remember something, don't pay much attention and you might not remember it. But if there's an experience that you think, I want to remember this, think about that. I'm going to pay a lot of attention to what's happening here. I'm going to use my senses so I can really encode this memory deep so that I can pull it up. So that's the first step in building a memory, is encoding. The second is storage. So there's short-term storage, as you know, and long-term storage. When brain research talk about short-term memory, they're talking about 30 seconds or so. And our brains, the research would suggest, can remember about 7 pieces of information. So 7 items on a grocery list, a 7-digit phone number. And if you're wanting to remember something, obviously repeating it is really important, but not putting another thing in the short-term memory to replace the first thing. So, okay, I'm going to remember your number, repeat it, and then use it. So if you try to remember another 7 things, then I think that the first thing that you're trying to remember will get replaced. The next is long-term memory. So these are memories that we can access weeks, years in the future. And the one thing I wanted to note about long-term memory is when you're shifting from short-term to long-term memory, when a memory is shifting one to the other, alcohol and sleep deprivation will impact your brain's ability to shift from short-term to long-term memory. So if you're having that issue and you haven't been diagnosed with any kind of dementia, then really making sure that you're sleeping well and cutting back on the drinking will help your brain make that transition between short-term and long-term memory. And the last stage of building a memory is this retrieval. So actually calling up memories. So we'll get into later, sometimes people can have issues with retrieval of memories. but I'll go back to this lack of attention. So sometimes people think, oh, I can't remember, and it's a concern. Well, sometimes, and not always, you can't remember because you didn't really pay enough attention when you were encoding the memory. So retrieval and attention really goes together. Gurmit, have any questions come up in the Q&A or in the chat at all?
Not yet.
Not yet. Perfect. Good. So there's a whole section of the book, and remembering that we're kind of looking at the material from this Keep Sharp Dr. Gupta book, talking about the common ways for the brain to break down. So if you do have the book, and I would recommend it, there is a section that goes into the physiology of the brain, and it talks about how the brain cells morph. And you're welcome to kind of read that through. It's quite technical. And what I wanted to really focus on, as I mentioned, is things that we can affect in our lifestyle that affect, cause the brain to break. So one of the main things is this lack of blood flow. So smoking and high cholesterol are two ways that you can impact the blood flow to your brain. And exercise would come in here as well. Exercise being a really critical part, and cardiovascular exercise specifically to get proper blood flow to your brain. Obesity will impact and will be one way to start to have breakage of the brain, and abdominal fat. And I pull out abdominal fat specifically because I looked at a research study that's said people that had increased abdominal fat, so in the biggest kind of category there, had a 3 times greater risk for dementia. So really thinking through and managing your abdominal fat is important for your brain health. It's important for a lot of aspects of health, but your brain health is what we're talking about today. High blood pressure is another way to cause problems for the brain moving forward. And then insulin resistance. So having chronic high blood sugar is really difficult for the brain because it gets overwhelmed with insulin and it just has a hard time functioning. So some people in the book, Dr. Gupta calls dementia type 3 diabetes because of this incredible link between insulin resistance and brain health. So one part of the book that I thought would be comforting to a lot of us is this normal or not normal. So on page 71, again in the book, there's a researcher, Dr. Mary Fishner, who does a look at what is normal parts of aging, and dementia is not a normal part of aging. There is some changes to the brain as we age that are normal and does cause some declines, but dementia isn't necessarily a normal part of aging. So these are the things, you can take a nice deep breath, which she'd say are quite normal, just normal part of aging. The first is absent-mindedness. So the example she uses is forgetting where you put your keys. Again, it comes back to if you're absent when you're trying to encode the memory, you're not going to remember. So putting the keys in the same spot or making sure that you're really focusing when you're putting your keys down is really going to help with this absent-mindedness. Blocking, so not being able to recall something from memory, you think, oh, it's right there, that's fairly normal. Scrambling, so getting the details of an experience wrong, but remembering you're kind of getting most things. And this kind of goes back to our car example. You're storing different parts of a memory in different parts of the brain. So sometimes you're pulling some of them and other them are a bit muddled. Fading away. So we talked about this example when we talked about short-term memory. So the brain does clear out older memories, especially older memories that aren't encoded super well. So Dr. Fishner is saying that this is fairly normal. Struggling for retrieval. So the example she gives, which is one we often get concerned about, is forgetting someone's name. And it's interesting, actually, this is an interesting thing to note. I'm finding with all the Zoom calls, I'm getting better with people's names because I see their names on the screen and I see their picture and their name. So that's one thing. If you're on these Zoom calls a lot with people, focus on it. Think, oh yeah, that's their name. Because you can always look back and see, what name they have on their screen. But struggling for retrieval is something that is normal. And then muddled multitasking. So research shows that as we get older, the more it does take more effort for the brain to remain focused. But in general, Dr. Gupta does not recommend multitasking. Better to focus on one task at a time, as opposed to trying to do everything halfway and not really doing anything particularly well. So trying to focus on one activity at a time for us, for seniors, as well as for all the other younger people in your lives. Any questions, Gurmit, or anything coming up in the chat?
No, not yet.
Nope. Okay, hopefully it's all making sense. All right, my favorite topic. So in the book, there's a whole chapter on exercise, and movement is medicine, I think is the name of the chapter. I pull a quote directly from the book because I'm obviously biased, a big fan of exercise, but so physical inactivity has been calculated to be the most significant risk factor for cognitive decline and the development of dementia. The most significant risk factor. So if you're really concerned about brain health and you have limited time, and I was going to choose between a crossword and a long walk, I would choose a long walk in terms of what the research is saying for your brain health. Exercise is absolutely critical. It helps the brain in two different ways. One is circulating blood sugar and reducing inflammation, as well as releasing growth factors. So we talked about that insulin resistance issue and obesity issue. So exercise really helps manage the blood sugar. And the second, maybe not as obvious way is, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I just want to see my screen. Helping the brain by reducing stress and anxiety, which helps improve sleep and mood. So again, the most important thing to take from this presentation and the summary of this book is how critical exercise, and cardiovascular specifically, is for brain health. And I will get into a lot more detail about that and exactly what you should be doing in a few minutes. So how much exercise should you be doing? This is the recommendation from the book. This is also the recommendation from Canada's Physical Activity Guide for people over 65. So this is you. This is exactly directed at you. You should be doing 150 minutes of exercise a week. You should be strength training twice a week. And some research, which is incredible, shows that an hour of moderate activity a day, which is tripling that recommendation, reduces your risk of dying prematurely by 39%. And I don't know exactly how they categorize dying prematurely. I should have looked that up. Okay, so let's launch that second poll, Gurmit, and I'll give you a couple of minutes just to think through, on average, about how much exercise do you think you get a week?
Yeah, the poll is launched.
So walks are definitely included in this. Light stretching is included.
Yeah, so 70% voted.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still growing. 80%. Yeah, 90% now.
Ross,
So,
you want a spot for negligible? Okay, what's nice to see you, Ross. You must have jumped in. I didn't see you at the beginning. What are the results, Gurmit?
okay. So the results, 55% says less than 150 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's 36% says 150 minutes or more.
Mm-hmm.
And 9% says I have no idea. and hate this question.
I just put that I hate this question because sometimes people are like, oh, don't ask me that. So again, it's really something for you to be keeping track of. Sometimes I'll say to people, especially when they retire or when they hit whatever age it is, it should really be any age. Think about exercise like your part-time job. That's how much focus and attention you should be putting on it. Saying I do my 1 hour group class a week, or I see my trainer once a week, fantastic. That's great. I have an active lifestyle, super. But 150 minutes a week is minimum what you should be getting. All right, cognitive reserve, and be patient with me as I put these two different pictures together. So when Dr. Gupta in the book talks about doing autopsies on people's brains after they've died, and researchers are trying to figure out, two brains can look really similar in terms of the decline in the brains, and the brain, you can see dementia in both, in terms of the patterns of what's happening in the brain in both people. But one person is really high functioning, and you wouldn't necessarily know they have dementia. And the other person has a lot of symptoms of dementia, but their brains look the same. And research is trying to figure out, why is that? And the answer really has to do with the higher functioning person throughout their life has developed more brain networks through education, learning, curiosity. I mean, you guys are all at a webinar, so I think I'm preaching to the choir here. But they give them a cognitive reserve to tap into. And if you want to read more about that, that's on page 118 of that Keep Sharp book. And the reason I have a picture of somebody entering a country, I guess, looks like a border, is think about the lanes as different areas for cognitive reserve. So one lane is backed up. I'm going to be waiting for hours. There's an accident. I can't access that lane. Oh, look at, I have all of these other lanes I can go into. So think of the cognitive reserve like that, different roads. So my brain has damage in one area. I have some dementia. I have some issues. There's a lack of a dendrite. There's, there's stuff going on. Okay, I have another road, and I take a different road. And so it's about building lots of roads. And when you build this cognitive reserve, it's not really something that you can do absentmindedly. So, if you do the same crossword the same way, you're kind of drinking your tea, you're having a chat with your partner, you're sort of doing the crossword. It's good social fun time. That's no problem with that. But are you challenging the brain? So you want to actually make demands on your brain. You want to make it kind of hard and kind of uncomfortable. That's when you're creating cognitive reserve. There's a question I'm noticing here. What types of exercise beside walking? I garden a lot and it is strenuous. If you hike for 2 hours, does that count as 150 minutes? So yes, so the focus here should be on cardiovascular. So walking, swimming, biking, hiking for sure. So gardening would be an activity, and that could be included in that depending on how active the gardening is, if you're pretty stagnant or if you're kind of moving around a lot. And if you hike for 2 hours, you can count that as 150 minutes for sure, but it would be nice to get it across more than one day. So, if you're able, the recommendation is to do even more than 150 minutes if you can. I would say the 150 minutes is a minimum.
Yeah, we have one question in Q&A.
Yes, I think I just answered it.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can't talk about brain health without talking about sleep. It's absolutely critical for brain health. It's definitely not time wasted, as our society sometimes feels like it, it's sort of equating to laziness or something, which is just absolutely untrue. So again, a quote directly from Dr. Gupta's book, chronic inadequate sleep puts people at higher risk for dementia, depression, learning and memory problems, heart disease, high blood pressure, weight gain, diabetes, and fall-related injuries. So it should be really a high priority for you to make sure you're getting proper sleep for your health, for your brain health, for everything. Getting less than 6 hours of sleep reduces daytime alertness by a third, which is significant. And the whole, and Mom, I think you told me this before, well, I need less sleep. No, you don't. And I am talking to everybody. Seniors, the sleep patterns might change, but you need the same amount of sleep as Dr. Gupta says in the book. So you can't function well on 4 hours, for example. None of us can. And one of the main purposes of sleep in terms of brain health, it actually helps clean the brain up. So there's a brain-derived neurotrophic factor that gets released when you sleep. And it's just, think about it, clean. We saw that border crossing and all of those lanes. Well, just think about a cleanup. Everything gets cleaned up so you can learn new things the next day. So I can't emphasize the importance of sleep. It's tough. I know people talk about, well, you want me to stay hydrated and you want me to have a good sleep. Those don't go together. I have to get up and pee a million times a night. I get all that. Play around with it. You might just want to take your water intake earlier in the day so that you stay hydrated, so you're not up and peeing a million times throughout the night. But really, sleep is super important. Okay. Doctor, yeah, so questions, a good question. Does the doctor mention the use of sleeping pills? Yes, doesn't recommend them. So I can send a specific kind of link out, but essentially it's just saying it's interrupting your body's natural ability to sleep well on its own. Things like melatonin is, your body will naturally produce melatonin. Magnesium is a precursor. This part isn't in the book, but magnesium is a precursor to melatonin. So I'd recommend taking magnesium. I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking high doses of melatonin because it impacts your body ability to produce melatonin. And you're not getting proper REM sleep if you are reliant on sleeping pills. So it's not really recommended. Obviously, sometimes we need these things here and there, but in terms of really good sleep and restful sleep, you want to try to find strategies to get that without the use of sleeping aids. All right. Nutrition and brain health. Again, this is an area of expertise for us here at Vintage Fitness. And there will be no surprises on this slide, especially for you guys that have been coming to these webinars every 6 weeks, or there's just so much information on nutrition. So you should eat more fresh veg, whole berries, fish, healthy fats, nuts and seeds, and I put the water part in. You should be drinking more water. You should eat less fried food, pastries and sugary foods, processed foods, red meat, and whole fat dairy like cheese and butter. So the question from Tony, oh, nice to see you, Tony. Nice to have you here. So does the hours of sleep have to be in one lay down? Not necessarily. Ideally, yes. Dr. Gupta doesn't recommend long naps. And I hear a collective sigh. Some power naps are okay, but you can, if you have long naps in the afternoon, and if it works for you, that's great. If you find it's impacting your sleep at night, you want to try to get more sleep in the evening and have less long naps. And a power nap would be 20 minutes, 20 minutes or less. One strategy for a power nap is actually to drink your coffee right before you have your nap, depending on, obviously not if it's too late in the afternoon, because what that will do is you'll kind of have your coffee, it's warm and comforting, the caffeine wouldn't hit yet, and then you'll kind of wake yourself up so that you're not sleeping too long, which will impact your sleep. So hopefully, Tony, that makes sense. Okay, a few more things on nutrition. So really planning and preparing, having a menu plan is important. Suri's trying to participate here. Regulating your eating habits. So eating slowly and mindfully. Really, we talked about encoding memories, taking time to savor your food. The Japanese have this great 80-20 rule. So you eat until you're about 80% satisfied. Using hand portions. So the palm of your hand is about the amount of protein that you want at every, in terms of your serving size, and measuring your energy input and output if weight loss is something that you want to do. Another tip, a couple of tips around nutrition. So, choosing higher quality foods, so more whole foods and fewer processed foods. At Vintage, we often talk about, if your great grandmother wouldn't recognize what you're eating as food, don't eat it. So try to get it as natural as possible. Make sure that you're getting enough lean protein, carbs, and fiber, and healthy fats. And you want to try to get as much of your nutrients from food as you can. Supplementing something like vitamin D is recommended, because especially in Canada, we just don't get enough of it, and maybe some omega-3s. But one of the things in the book is the brain vitamin craze. Dr. Gupta is saying it's really not well researched as to whether these different vitamins for the brain have any effect. So he wasn't necessarily recommending those. And if you drink, really do so in moderation. Okay, Esther, I'll get to your question here. I was recently diagnosed with a stress fracture in my hip. Have been advised to rest as much as possible to allow healing for approximately 6 to 12 months. Oh, Esther, I'm sorry. Is doing upper body exercises seated in a chair counted as exercise? It is. You want to try to use the arms you want to try to get your heart rate up. That's what's going to get blood flow. So I think it's possible to do it while seated, but you're going to look a little crazy, but just go for it. So really big movement with the arms, marching with the arms to try to get your heart rate up as much as you can without putting impact on your hip. Getting in the pool with the go ahead of your physiotherapist could be another idea if the issue is weight bearing on that hip, and you can get your cardiovascular exercise there. Thanks for your question. So your brain health action plan is get 150 minutes or more a week of exercise, which includes the negligible category there, Ross. Find new ways to really challenge your mind. And this is important. I mean, maybe you take another language, knowing, like for me, I'd like to learn French. I don't think I'll ever be very good at it, or I'm not even sure if I'll ever be able to properly order at a restaurant, but just learning it, super challenging for me. So take something that is a challenge. Again, your brain gets really efficient. So try not to do the same crossword the same way, sitting in the same chair, having the same, what can shake your brain up a bit in terms of learning and challenge, and be honest with yourself about it. Get more sleep. So aim for that 7 hours of sleep. Feed your brain nourishing food. And again, I don't think anything from the nutrition section will be new information for you. But if you need support and accountability, our training team does help you keep a food log and gives you some guidance and motivation and direction on how to make sure that you're nourishing your body and your brain. Connecting authentically to people, and that's a big part of brain health. If you're familiar with the blue zones, the people that live the longest in the world, connection to other people is an important part of that. And then managing your stress, because stress impacts the brain really negatively. And it's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do, I understand, because we're living through stressful situations. But again, keeping stress management as a pillar of your health, just like going for your walk. So with that in mind, let's just do a really quick breathing exercise, because these breathing exercises are pretty easy and they can kind of be done from anywhere. So sitting up nice and tall, like something's pulling the top of your head up. Maybe you feel the back of the neck lengthen a little bit. Let's roll the shoulders up, pull them back and drop them down so the spine feels nice and long. If you can, you might need to move yourself forward on your chair a bit to keep your feet on the earth. We're going to take a deep inhale through the nose and a slow, long exhale through the mouth. And another deep inhale through the nose. Maybe the exhale is slower and longer this time. Two more like that. Nice deep inhale through the nose, mouth is closed. Slow exhale through the mouth. And this last one, you're inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the nose. Good. So, takes 30 seconds. What that does is activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It controls your sympathetic nervous system. So even doing that once or twice a day is really going to help with stress management. And it feels good, doesn't it? All right, so Glenda, are bagged frozen veggies classified as processed if the nutritional list indicates no fat or sugar? No, they're not classified as processed. And in fact, frozen veggies are a good idea, especially in the winter when something's traveled a really long time in a truck. I would recommend frozen veg over something like from Colombia that's been hours and hours on a truck. Because what they do is they flash freeze it so the nutrients are still in it, in the veg. And then when you cook it, as long as you don't overcook it, you can get those veg. So absolutely, I recommend frozen veg and frozen fruit, especially in the winter. Thanks for the question. Okay. We're doing well. So again, a lot of you guys are already clients, and I thank you and appreciate you. And a lot of these 6-week webinars are really for you guys as a part of being a benefit of being part of Vintage Fitness. If you aren't a client with us and you need a bit of motivation, planning, support, coaching, the numbers here, it's just vintagefitness.ca. You'll get that number. We'd be happy to do a free consultation with a seniors fitness expert with you. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, we are specialized to work with dementia patients. So we have a dementia and exercise accreditation. All right, that's it from me. There's been a couple of great questions as we have gone through. Is there any additional questions that anyone has? So you can put it, oh, Roberta, you joined us. That's great. I'm glad you're able to get in. We had a couple people. So again, you can ask in the Q&A feature, or you can ask in the chat if you have any questions. If not, I would recommend this book that we reviewed this morning, Keep Sharp, Building a Better Brain at Any Age by Sanjay Gupta. It's very good, it's easy to read, and it looks like we have a couple of the book is probably expensive. Is it worth the cost? You know what, Glenda, just send me your address. I'll mail you my copy and then you can send it back. We'll do a little book club with it. I'm happy to lend it along to you. My pleasure. Lisa, great information. Thanks. Good. Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much for attending. Again, I will share the recording with you tomorrow, and I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday.